From early childhood, she experienced a deep devotion to vulnerable children, teens, adults, and families, and spent 35 years serving as an RN and trauma therapist in her community. I am absolutely honored to welcome Dr. Kelly Bohnhoff to the show today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, it's an honor, Amanda. Thank you so much.
And right off the bat, I want to say that I absolutely love your background, all these gorgeous pastel colors and books back there. And then your book, this stark contrast just standing at it just jumps out at you. So very nicely done.
Thank you.
So you have spent your entire life working so hard to help other people. And we'll get into that in a moment. But let's start with, who were you as a little girl? Where did you grow up? Where are you originally from?
Yeah, so after the pre-planning meeting, my parents and I jumped in to Denton, Texas, which is where I was born, and we had our own storyline, timeline, and world line that we wanted to unfold in this lifetime. So my parents were 19 when I was born, and I'm the oldest. And then I have three siblings. My brother has transitioned to the other side, and so is my mom to cheer us, the rest of us, on here. But I had three really important ideas when I landed into what I called the shark tank of energy, which was very heavy. And it was to keep my mother healthy, to keep my father happy, and to keep my siblings safe. And of course, it's not a big surprise then that I would become a registered nurse or that I would become a marriage and family therapist, really interested in trauma and how trauma echoes in families.
Right.
Another thing I had signed up to explore was child trafficking. So at the age of 10, I went to an overnight. I wasn't connected to my own inner guidance. And instead of probably listening to that still small voice that said, do not go down the street to that overnight, I did. And I found myself in what I call a web of energy. I thought my home life was giving me a lot of hurt and a lot of heartache, but that particular level of energy and those 2 years caught in that web really began a journey for me that unfolded a darkness, a surrender, a survival that I really hadn't understood before, as far as the depths of the human spirit and our ability to survive. And so I have spent my lifetime trying to answer one question, which is kind of a three-dimensional question. In the beginning, as a child, I asked, I wonder why children are being hurt by those who have an opportunity to love them and keep them safe. And so through my, which is now 38 years, I've had a spiritual awakening. I've had the opportunity to understand the journey in a very different way, through the mind, through the body, and then through the spirit. But when I went through door number 3, the spirit, I did do it kicking and screaming. And so I do appreciate the opportunity to still be here, to have had an unfolding occur where the book was born based on not just my experiences with my family in this lifetime, but in many lifetimes before. And so it is an honor and a privilege to be on the earth at this time to share a message that's really more empowered around this idea of, as survivors of specific types of experiences, childhood adversity being one of them, that we are actually what I call fondly the Navy SEALs of the universe. Our families actually landed in these experiences to heal trauma, balance our karma, unlock our hidden power of resilience, wisdom, and genius, and to remember what is sacred, which is us, our families, and everything in this world and outside of this world. So that is, in a nutshell, the story of my initial journey into this beautiful exploration of what it means to be human.
And right off the bat, when you said something about, your relationship with your family in general, you wanted to keep your mother healthy, your father happy, and your siblings safe. Did I get that right?
That's correct. Yes.
Right away, that is a lot of responsibility to put on a child's shoulders. That's a lot.
Right.
You're right. It's absolutely no wonder that you would become a nurse because you felt so early on that it was your responsibility to take care of other people. Did you find it difficult when you were a kid to take care of yourself as well? Or was your all of your attention and energy focused on taking care of everybody else around you?
Yeah. So really early in life, when this is developmental trauma or complex PTSD, or developmentally, in the work that I've done and some of the mystical experiences I've had, where I asked my higher self, when did I get the idea that I was unlovable, unworthy, and enough? And on top of that, when did everyone else's well-being become more important than my own?
Right.
And what was shared with me was very interesting because at the point of conception, actually, a point of my conception, both my parents were stressed. In other words, they were already holding trauma from their own childhood. And their parents were holding trauma from childhood. And so we all know about this energetic, we are energy. And so the ancestral trauma had been there. So even at the point of my conception, I was already healing ancestral trauma. So during gestation, mother was stressed. The time of birth, my mother was stressed. So, and father was stressed, and the whole family was stressed. But what I didn't understand that we were on something called the merry-go-round of survival, where family have these secrets that they keep, silence about the secret, the
Mhm.
shadows that happen, right? The sabotage, the status quo. We really wanted everything to appear as if everything was functioning, but it wasn't. Then we went into suffering and then survival. So that merry-go-round of survival is something that many trauma families are on, and yet they are not aware. And I couldn't understand why we were on it. And then I had one of the greatest aha moments so far that I've had, which I realized that I was actually addicted to suffering itself. In other words, all of the addictions that I had to Patron, pastries, purchases, and opioids were lesser addictions than to the main addiction, which is what humanity is healing right now, which is the addiction to suffering itself. And so for me, as I have unfolded my family's sacred promise to remember who we are, I began to use the energy of language to really help me heal my relationship to myself first, self honoring and knowing thyself. If I hadn't put that oxygen mask on first, then I would not have been able to heal the relationships with my parents, my siblings, my marriage, or the generations of family that surround me at this time. I have grown children and two granddaughters, 6 and 4, consider to be my guides on the side, because our children being born right now are much more aware of who they are, and they will hold that energy.
Absolutely. I love that you're able to do this for yourself, knowing that it's going to help everybody else that's in your life and who comes into your life. It's not an easy thing
Yes, and it
going through the
has to
healing
be done
process.
then. It's not. It takes tremendous courage, which is why I feel that our souls were highly ambitious. To come into this type of heavy, heavy suffering and energy, many families ask me, why would I choose a child as a young child? We don't remember. We have the spiritual amnesia. We came to paint a new canvas. The question that what I call the infinite intelligence, pure love, and sacred energy that we are, you can call that source or God or universe, just as a question. Basically, can I remember who I am as a sacred sovereign being through heavy suffering? Can I swim my way through? Can I figure out in the end that I have complete autonomy and sovereignty on the reality that I create? And as a scientist, I threw the BS flag on that, because that's belief system, by the way. Because I'm like, look, if I can't see it, touch it, taste it, feel it, smell it, that woo-woo stuff just doesn't work for me. And believe me when I tell you that as these out of body and dreams and visions began to download in my experience, it shook me to my core, because as a scientist, I couldn't understand what was really happening. But over the last 3.5 to 4 years, the book has unfolded. There is no doubt in my mind that I'm manifesting my own reality based on my own thoughts, words, beliefs, emotions, feelings, and actions. The key was the courage to transition from disempowering to empowering ways of being. And it took me a while to figure out how to navigate that, which is why I wanted the book to be something that people could use in their homes with their families. Because as a family therapist, I would go into homes or under bridges or into prisons or into juvenile court or wherever the person would be. And those are very tough circumstances to hold healing in. So, how can we bring healing into someone's life? And then, how can that energy then broadcast into a family that may or may not believe in any of it? And yet,
Right.
from my experience in working with my own family, it actually works to not say anything, to just shift your own beingness into a higher state of compassion, love, and forgiveness. And I noticed that in my marriage, in my relationship to my children, and then to the other generations, I had to turn back toward my parents. And I could not move far enough away from my family. Both my husband and I wanted to be as far away geographically as possible. What we didn't remember was that we're entangled through energetic quantum physics. So it didn't matter where my energy was, wherever I go, there I am. And so my family is still connected energetically. So I turned back in the direction 3 years ago, and so did my husband. And with intention, we moved back toward our families, not saying anything about the book or my dreams or vision or my shifts or anything. And we just sat with our energy and we chose to walk in the direction of those shadows so that we could heal them. And what I realized, Amanda, was so powerful to me. Do you remember that song, Shadow Dancing?
I
Shadow
do.
Dancing. I forget who sings it. Yeah.
Yeah.
As I began to use music to bring shadows into light, the biggest shadows for me were judgment of self, judgment of others, feeling separate and not interconnected, which we are, and then the self-honoring. So as the blame, the shame, the heartache, the terror, the rage, the anguish began to move in my body, I decided to move it through dancing. And so as I'm dancing, I call it shadow dancing. And in moving my body, I was able to move the energy. And what I was able to notice through journaling and dreams was that that heavy energy was wanting to be free. It was wanting to be healed. And I had, through my programming in my childhood, it was explained to me that children are to be seen and not heard.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'll give you something to cry about.
Yep.
And so from the earliest age that I could even fathom a memory, I disassociated. I disassociated from my sacred true nature in order to survive, and any of us do.
Right.
So I had no connection to my body, and I was highly functional, but yet only when I was with others who were suffering was I able to open my heart. And energetically, what I didn't know was I was moving their energy through my heart and alchemizing their pain. I didn't know, though, that I was holding that pain within my own body, which is why at the end of 2020, I had an absolute breakdown mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually at the age of 57. And that would have been the only way that I could have stopped, was just coming to a complete standstill.
You know, so many people had to go through so many complete changes because of the lockdown, because they weren't allowed to go and hang out with friends or go to restaurants, and there were no more distractions. We had to face ourselves. And that's hard. That is always hard. And I wanted to touch on something in your book. So the book is called What's Going On with My Family, and it's a phenomenal book. But in chapter 7, you go into the allegory of Plato's cave. And on page 172, if you don't mind, I'd like to read just a little bit, just a little bit. The shadows of unresolved conflicts, communication breakdowns, and emotional distance may cast a gloomy cloud over a traumatized family. With technology, the shadows of disconnection and distraction may infiltrate the family unit. In a world dominated by digital devices and screen time, now you know why I picked this time to read this. Family members might retreat into virtual realms, forsaking meaningful interactions and genuine connections. The lack of present moment awareness can exacerbate the distance between family members, inhibiting the healing potential of face to face communication. Amen. There weren't cell phones and internet and that kind of stuff when you and I were growing up, but it still held true. We'd sit down and watch All in the Family. If you were growing up in the 70s, we would watch Three's Company. If you were growing up a little bit later than that, we still had our distractions, and it drove a wedge between families. We have to sit down and take the time to spend the time with our family members. If we don't, we're just going to drift further and further apart.
Yeah, and I think one of the greatest opportunities are what I call portals, which is the possibility of remembering true mind with love, is that just as technology can bring people closer together, so there was an opportunity for knowledge of empowering messages to move through our world, and for you and I this moment to be together. We're not in the same geographic location, and to have this wonderful conversation. So there are many positive things.
Right.
There are also distractions that divide, and when it's not in balance. So in other words, when I use technology to go into another virtual world, which is what I was doing, it really is just a matter for me, as I knew who I was as long as I was helping others feel better. In other words, that was an attachment. When I no longer could get to the children, I couldn't get to the families, that's when I had my breakdown, because I didn't know who I was if I wasn't helping other people.
Yeah.
And so even though we did have the technology to be online with a traumatized child through Zoom, it wasn't the same. And so what I would say right now for families in my encouragement is just compassionately in there. It's called compassionate inquiry, a curiosity. So I notice that I'm on my technology when my child is playing. I notice when I'm on technology at my child's soccer game. I notice I'm on technology as my child is trying to go to sleep, or my teenager is trying to have a conversation with me, or if my romantic partner. So what I notice in the world when I go out is that small children are holding technology at a very young age, in restaurants, in parks, in just everywhere. And so what we're doing is we're training and entrancing young children to utilize that as a coping mechanism. So they won't be able to learn how to make eye contact and to stay present. Now, many generations of people have been programmed and entranced and entrained into their technology because of the drama and the distraction. So the good news is that once we understand that we can balance the amount of technology we're using and when we're using it, now we're conscious of it. It's just like what we're eating or what we're thinking. It's the same thing. But I think families would be surprised if they just did a 24-hour note to self: how much technology am I using, my partner using, my children using, and when are you using it? So I noticed that the families that are in balance with their mind, body, and spirit are in parks. They're walking together, fishing, they're meditating they actually schedule that quiet time to play, to be creative and curious. They go to a painting together, or they make music together, or they cook. So my encouragement to anyone is just that part of the book was just to bring attention and awareness to something that is kind of insidiously, unconsciously taking over our attention. And where attention goes, energy flows. So just be mindful and know that there is balance in everything, including technology.
Absolutely. In some cases, it's been really helpful for communication in families too. I definitely don't want to knock communication completely. My best friend's daughter is autistic, and sometimes she cannot verbally communicate what it is that she's thinking or feeling, even though she's highly verbal most of the time anyway, especially about her most
Right,
passionate loves in life. But when she's feeling something or when
right,
she's scared or she's angry, she cannot put that into words except through typing, through writing. And she can send a
right.
message to her mother or to me and say, I'm scared because, or I'm angry because, or this happened today and I don't know what to do, when she can't say these things. So technology is
Beautiful.
definitely, it's both. It is good and bad. Eh, but it's also important to note that if you've got kids in your house, like young kids, it's really hard for them already to say what it is that they're wanting to say, especially to their parents. You're bigger than them. You're scarier than them. You tell them what to do. They don't know how to communicate with everything. And if you're on your phone and you're paying more attention to that than you are your kid, you're probably going to miss the message that they're trying to give you.
Well, and you'll miss your own messages. And I think this is what's so important about parenting and grandparenting and great grandparenting is that no matter your age, your soul is eternal. Your soul wants you to be played. It didn't come down here into this realm to suffer. It came here to be creative, connected, and curious. And so the children are this beautiful opportunity, if you are to be aware of them, to remind you as a reflection of your own inner divine child. And so I feel that our children can be a tremendous mirror to remind us of what is fun. One of the fun things that I do with my grandchildren is we blow bubbles together. And we will spend 15 minutes giggling over the bubbles and all the light coming through and who can catch them and who's bigger. So just 15 minutes of bubble time, even if you don't have any children around you, go out and get some bubbles and blow bubbles for yourself 15 minutes of every day, and you will feel lighter, you will feel brighter. And so what I'm saying to anyone, parents, grandparents, or even if you don't have a child, even if you have an animal or anything like that, your higher self, your soul is wanting you to remember and to be in joy again. And so joy cannot necessarily be found through the technology can guide you to ideas that may bring you to the joy. But what I would say is hunt for joy was one of the greatest openings for me to remember my sacred nature, which sacred is worthy of love, devotion, and reverence. And so now instead of paying attention to my self-destruction, I pay attention to my self-devotion. And I do that every day. And I try to mirror that as much as I can and to notice when others are mirroring it to me.
And on the note of bubbles, when my husband and I got married a few years ago, I actually bought a little case of those little tiny bubble things that you can pass out to all your guests. But we didn't have a normal reception. The only reason I bought them, I used the wedding as an excuse, but I kept them for myself. And I love going outside and blowing bubbles.
Yes.
I've
It's
used them
so
all up
beautiful, so
myself.
joyous. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's there's something about being a kid for somebody who didn't have much of a childhood. You need to have playtime. You need to be able to chill and relax and enjoy what you're doing and be goofy once in a while. I'm very lucky that my husband is every bit as goofy as I am, and we get to be goofy kids together. We've got grandbabies. We are going to be goofy kids with the grandbabies too.
Exactly. And that is how you shift the echo of intergenerational trauma. My vision is that childhood adversity will be healed forever in this humanity's cycle of ascension. In other words, we've learned as much from that particular experience. And I have great compassion for those who have chosen to explore that energy, whether it's being the villain or the victim. And what I would say is the moment we can hold the energy of love, knowing we are all interconnected, it's not easy to understand and really know that the villains in my own story were an integral part of my healing. And for that, I am deeply grateful. It does take a while to get there, but how we heal trauma in families is to find our still small voice and to become joyful again.
It has come to that part in the episode where I have to ask you my very last question, which I'm sad about because I could probably spend hours just conversing with you. But it's always my favorite question because the answer can change depending on what hour of what day of the week it might be, because it depends on what your day is like right now. What is one thing that you truly love about yourself that's not related to your physical features?
I believe it would be the energy of joy and divine love that people feel when they are in my presence.
If you've enjoyed tonight's episode, please make sure you check out the episode description. You'll find links there on how you can learn more about this guest, links to connect with them on social media, and how to support the podcast. Remember, I don't get paid to do this. My boss is a bit tight-fisted, but I can say that. I work for myself.